Ready for drop in 5, the Ari's voice purred in Jerry Hamill's ear, a ghostly caress accompanying the words. His suit's companion, which he'd named Lisa, had learned his preference for physical comfort before high-stress situations. The non-Newtonian fluid layer between his skin and the suit's inner membrane rippled slightly, simulating the sensation of fingers running down his spine. "Thanks, beautiful," he muttered, checking his weapons one last time. The matte black surface of his armor seemed to drink in what little light reached them on the dark side of Leffel. Around him, the other members of the strike team were going through their own pre-drop rituals. Thad Lohman stood perfectly still, his eyes closed. The family man's suit AI, Margaret, named after his late mother, was running through their usual pre-mission prayer. Though an atheist himself, Thad had found comfort in the ritual after his years as a ranger. The soft blue glow of his suit's status indicators pulsed in time with his steady breathing. Shosho Yarrow was moving through a series of stretches, her suit flowing like liquid metal around each precise movement. Her AI, Kenji, projected calming waves through the neural interface, their partnership so deep it barely required words anymore. The former JSDF operator had modified her suit's vocal interface to maintain complete silence, communicating purely through neural links and haptic feedback. Terry Lice's fingers danced through the air, interfacing with his suit's advanced cyber warfare suite. His AI, which he'd simply named V, was already probing the target facility's digital defenses. The NSA Analyst suite was unique, prioritizing electronic warfare capabilities over pure combat power. The ghostly blue hollow projections only he could see through his neural link painted target data across his vision. Mac Hargrove stood at the front of the bay, his weathered face illuminated by the red drop warning light. His suit was noticeably different from the others' older, with marks and modifications that spoke of countless missions. His AI, whose name he never shared, maintained a professional distance that matched its operator's demeanor. The team knew better than to ask about either's history. "The Lythals think they're so clever," Terry said, breaking the pre-drop silence. "Those disappeared merchant ships. They left more digital breadcrumbs than my kids' breakfast cereal." His suit rippled with quiet laughter, V sharing his amusement. "Keep the chatter minimal," Mac's voice cut through the bay. "Remember, this is a message, not a massacre. We go in quiet, hit hard, and vanish. The Lithal Collective needs to understand that humanity isn't just another prey species they can bully." The drop bay's floor began to iris open, revealing the planet's surface far below. The team's suits automatically adjusted to compensate for the sudden rush of thin upper atmosphere, their enhanced musculature and shock absorption systems preparing for the coming impact. "Drop in 3, Lisa whispered in Jerry's ear, her virtual arms wrapping around him from behind. 2. The sensation of a kiss on his neck, their pre-drop tradition. 1. 5 figures stepped into the void, their suits instantly adjusting to the hypersonic free fall. The dropship vanished back into the night, leaving no trace of its presence. As they plummeted toward their target, Jerry couldn't help but smile. The Lythals had never faced anything like them, not just because of their technology, but because they fundamentally misunderstood humanity. They thought fear would drive humans away. Instead, it had brought the most dangerous predators in the galaxy right to their doorstep. The ground rushed up to meet them, their suits' kinetic dampeners preparing for impact. 2 kilometers to target. The real fun was about to begin. In the council hall, Ken Hayson adjusted his collar, a gesture that appeared perfectly diplomatic to the varied species around him. None of them realized he was actually checking sensor feeds with Rebecca, his suit's AI companion. To them, his attire was simply an example of humanity's quaint attachment to traditional clothing, a charming quirk of a species that seemed almost obsessively focused on peaceful resolution. 3 Lithal observers in the upper gallery, Rebecca whispered in his mind, her presence undetectable to the numerous but primitive surveillance systems in the chamber. Their technology can't even detect our basic encryptions, let alone realize I exist. Ken maintained his pleasant, diplomatic smile. Humanity's greatest advantage wasn't their technology, it was that no one suspected they had it. The galaxy saw humans as the mediators, the peace seekers, the species that would exhaust every diplomatic option before even considering conflict. They had no idea that this tendency came from humanity's intimate familiarity with war, not from its absence. Ambassador Thextal of the Lithal Collective was addressing the council about the piracy in the Outer Rim, his chitinous faceplates shifting in calculated patterns. These criminal elements must be dealt with through unified council action. Perhaps our human friends could lead another diplomatic mission to negotiate with these raiders. Several species made their equivalent of appreciative noises. Humans were always so good at talking things through, weren't they? Always ready with another peace proposal, another diplomatic initiative. So reliable. So predictable. Rebecca's touch ghosted across Ken's shoulders, a gesture of amusement only he could feel. The Lithal representative had no idea that his species' recent successes against human merchant ships were about to be answered with something very different from diplomacy. Ambassador Hasten, the council speaker's voice resonated through the chamber. Would the Human Federation be willing to lead such a diplomatic effort? Ken stood, his suit systems gathering data that no other species would even think to look for. They saw a simple fabric business suit. They didn't know about the quantum computers woven into its fibers, or the AI companion who was as dear to him as any friend. They didn't understand that humans had mastered artificial intelligence generations ago, because humans never spoke about it. Just like they never spoke about their military capabilities. Honored speaker, Ken began with the warm smile that had become humanity's trademark in galactic politics. The Human Federation is always eager to pursue peaceful solutions. A subtle vibration against his wrist, Rebecca's signal that something was happening. Something that made the Lithal observers shift uneasily in the gallery, though they didn't yet know why. In fact, he continued, maintaining his gentle diplomatic tone, we believe so strongly in peace that we will spare no effort in discovering who is responsible for these attacks. He paused, his expression one of sincere concern. After all, we wouldn't want any misunderstandings to damage the harmony we all value so deeply. The other species saw exactly what they expected: another human diplomat promoting peaceful resolution. None of them caught the real message hidden in his words. None of them understood that humanity's dedication to diplomacy came from knowing exactly what the alternative looked like. Their surveillance systems just picked up something concerning, Rebecca whispered in his mind. They're trying very hard not to show it. Ken maintained his peaceful smile. Somewhere out there, humanity was demonstrating why Earth's history of warfare had never needed to be discussed in the council chambers. Some lessons were best learned firsthand. Swift justice. Terry's fingers danced through holographic interfaces only he could see, his suit's AIV harmonizing with his thoughts faster than conscious direction. Their security is cute, he muttered, as decades-old human encryption protocols tore through Lithal cyber defenses like tissue paper. Almost feel bad for them. Almost. Less commentary, more action. Mac's voice cut through the team channel as he and Thad breached the western perimeter. Their suits moved in perfect silence, the non-Newtonian fluid layer absorbing every footfall. The Lithal guards never saw them coming. Shisha's voice whispered through the neural link, third quadrant cleared. Their response teams are moving exactly as predicted. Her suit's enhanced muscles carried her through a series of movements that would have been impossible for an unaugmented human, each strike precisely calculated by Kenji to exploit Lithal physiology. The real target lay in the facility's core. The Lithal's secret weapon, a planetary-scale mass driver they thought no one knew about, waited in its cradle. Jerry moved through the shadows, Lisa adjusting his suit's optical camouflage to match the shifting patterns of emergency lighting. You know what's really funny? Jerry's voice carried a hint of amusement as he planted the charges. They built this whole facility thinking they were being sneaky, and we watched them do it. Satellite by satellite, shipment by shipment. Focus, Mac commanded, but there was a trace of dark humor in his voice. Terry, status? Downloading their entire weapons database now, Terry replied. VS already scrubbing their surveillance systems. As far as their records will show, this place suffered a catastrophic power core failure. Very tragic. Very accidental. The charges Jerry planted were special human engineering at its finest. They wouldn't just destroy the mass driver, they would make it look like the Lythal's own safeguards had failed. A malfunction, not an attack. The perfect message: we know what you're doing, and we can stop you whenever we want. 60 seconds, Mac announced. Begin withdrawal. They moved like ghosts through the chaos they'd created. Lithal security forces rushed past them, their primitive motion sensors unable to detect the advanced stealth systems of the human suits. Emergency klaxons wailed, their sound dampened by the suit's audio filters. 30 seconds to detonation, Lisa whispered in Jerry's ear, her virtual touch steering him through the optimal escape route. Transport is in position. They emerged from different exits, their movements choreographed with millisecond precision. Above them, appearing like a shadow against the night sky, their extraction vessel waited. It looked like nothing more than a piece of space debris, its stealth systems making it nearly invisible even to human sensors. 10 seconds, Mac's voice was calm. Board now. They leapt, their suits compensating for the gravity differential. The moment they were secure, the ship began its ascent. Behind them, the charges detonated in sequence. The explosion was beautiful in its precision. The mass driver facility collapsed in on itself, its power cores containment failing exactly as would be expected from a cascading system's failure. Every scrap of evidence, every security recording, every weapon's blueprint, all of it was either corrupted or deleted. Mission time? Mac asked as they breached the atmosphere. 14 minutes, 38 seconds, Terry's AI responded. Well within parameters. As their ship vanished into the darkness of space, the Lithal Collective's most secret weapon burned. On the planet below, investigators would find exactly what they expected, evidence of their own technological failure. They would never admit what happened, could never admit it. That was the point. Think they'll get the message? Jerry asked, as Lisa helped him run post-mission diagnostics. Mac's response carried years of experience: they'll learn, or we'll have to teach them again. The extraction ship accelerated to FTL, leaving behind nothing but questions the Lythals wouldn't dare to ask. 14 minutes had been all it took to remind them that humanity's preference for diplomacy was a choice, not a limitation. Diplomatic currents. Ken's collar tingled softly as Rebecca alerted him to the incoming message from Grand Ambassador Cameron. The chamber's organic architecture housed representatives from species across the galaxy, from the militant Vrax, whose culture still celebrated their ancient civil wars, to the mercantile Trill collective who had evolved through economic rather than military competition. Message downloaded, Rebecca whispered in his mind. Multiple species showing elevated interest patterns. Ken stood, noting how the Vrax representative clicked his battle-scarred mandibles in what their species considered poorly hidden amusement. To them, humans were an oddity, a species that had somehow achieved spaceflight without the crucible of widespread warfare. Their anthropologists had found Earth's peace monuments and diplomatic archives, but never thought to look deeper. Honored members of the Council, Ken began, his voice carrying that gentle concern that had become humanity's trademark. Grand Ambassador Cameron has shared some insights regarding military technological developments that I believe we should discuss. The Vrax representative chittered something to his aide, their universal translator rendering it as charming. They probably discovered it while studying peace treaties. Several of the other warrior heritage species shared their own species equivalent of knowing looks. The humans were so earnest, so focused on diplomacy. What could they possibly know about weapon systems? Our scientific institutes have observed concerning patterns, Ken continued, his expression thoughtfully worried. Patterns suggesting increased risks of technological accidents, particularly in military research facilities. The Drev ambassador, whose species had unified through a series of brutal continental wars, leaned over to the Vrax representative. Probably noticed it during a cultural exchange program, the translator rendered their rumbling whisper, drawing amused gestures from both. Only the Lithal sat perfectly still, their stillness noted by Rebecca's sensors. They, unlike their fellow militaristic species, had learned enough about Earth to know better than to dismiss human warnings. Their research had gone deeper than the surface, had found the carefully obscured traces of humanity's true history. While the Human Federation remains committed to peaceful dialogue, Ken's voice carried just the right note of gentle warning. We feel compelled to share our concerns about certain technological developments. History shows that advanced military systems can be particularly prone to devastating failures, especially when developed in secret. The warrior species in the chamber continued their quiet amusement. The humans were so predictably peaceful, always looking to prevent conflict rather than understand military matters. The VRAC's representative was already composing a report about how the humans' naive concerns could be leveraged for additional military funding. We believe, Ken continued, reading from Cameron's carefully crafted message, that transparency and cooperation are the best safeguards against such accidents. After all, we would be deeply saddened if any of our galactic neighbors suffered a catastrophic technological failure due to rushed development schedules or overlooked safety protocols. They probably learned about military protocols from historical peace conferences, the Drev ambassador commented, their translator carrying the tone of indulgent amusement. Only the Lithal understood. Only they had discovered Earth's buried battlefields, had calculated the true meaning of humanity's population fluctuations throughout history. Only they recognized the steel hidden beneath the silk of human diplomacy. Additionally, Ken added, his voice warm with diplomatic concern, we suggest forming a committee to study recent technological failures across Council space. Understanding past accidents is crucial to preventing future ones. The Lithal representative's translator crackled as he spoke. The collective appreciates human concern for safety. We will take these warnings under advisement. As the chamber filled with the dismissive murmurs of warrior species who thought they knew war better than humanity ever could, Ken allowed himself a small smile. Let them believe humans were naive peacebrokers. Let them joke about humanity's diplomatic obsession. After all, the best predator was the one that no one recognized as a threat. Ken was unsurprised when his office door chimed to announce the Lithal delegation. Rebecca had tracked their approach through the station's surveillance network, their agitated movements betraying their intent before they'd even arrived. Ken watched the subtle signs of growing unease in the Lithal delegation as they attempted their intimidation. Rebecca tracked their biosignatures, noting the increasing stress patterns in their chitinous frames. They had arranged themselves around his office in what they thought was a threatening formation, their 2-meter frames towering over his seated position. Ambassador Hasten, Thextal's translator, rendered his clicks. About the recent accident at one of our facilities. Fascinating thing about accidents, Ken interrupted softly, standing. The movement was liquid smooth, almost casual, but Rebecca noted how the Lithal aide's threat assessment systems suddenly spiked. They often teach us something about ourselves. The delegation's mandibles twitched as Ken stepped around his desk, his movements carrying an odd grace that their combat-trained instincts suddenly found disturbing. Their species had evolved as apex predators, yet something about this small, seemingly fragile human was setting off ancestral warning signals. For instance, Ken continued, clasping his hands behind his back, your species evolved as ambush predators. Pack hunters. You surround your prey. He gestured to their positioning with a slight smile, much like you're attempting now. Thextal's translator crackled as he tried to reassert control. We merely wish to discuss. But you never encountered pursuit predators during your evolution, did you? Ken's voice remained conversational, yet somehow filled the room. Never had to adapt to something that could run you to exhaustion. Something that would track you for days, never letting you rest, until you simply couldn't run anymore. The delegation shifted uncomfortably as Ken slowly paced the room's perimeter. Their combat instincts were screaming now, but they couldn't understand why. He was smaller, lighter, seemingly unarmored, yet something about his movement pattern was triggering deep genetic memories of being hunted. Humans, Ken continued, his smile never wavering, evolved as pursuit predators. We don't ambush. We don't need to. He stopped directly in front of Thextal. We simply follow. And wait. And follow again. Until our prey makes a mistake. Rebecca whispered in Ken's mind, Their combat response systems are approaching critical levels. They're beginning to understand your recent activities with our merchant ships. Ken's voice dropped lower, were very much like an ambush predator. Quick strikes. Hit and run. But you never stopped to ask why we didn't respond immediately, did you? The revelation hit the Lithal delegation like a physical blow. The humans hadn't failed to notice the attacks. They had been hunting, gathering data, learning patterns, following your secret base. Ken's smile turned predatory. We found it months ago. But like good pursuit predators, we waited, watched, learned everything about it. And when the time was right, he let the sentence hang. Thextal's translator couldn't fully convey the stress in his voice. Impossible. Our security. Did you know, Ken interrupted again, that human special forces operators can maintain peak combat efficiency for over 72 hours without rest? That our bodies evolved to repair themselves while still moving? That we can track prey across stellar distances using nothing but pattern recognition? He tilted his head. That we're actually stronger than we look. To demonstrate the last point, he casually picked up a heavy metallic paperweight from his desk, one that the Lithal knew should be beyond human muscle capacity, and squeezed. The metal deformed under his grip, his suit's enhanced strength systems operating so smoothly it looked like pure biological power. We prefer diplomacy, Ken set the crushed metal down, because we excel at war. Your people are just beginning to understand what that means. He returned to his seat, every movement still carrying that disturbing efficiency. I suggest you explain it to them very carefully. The Lithal delegation retreated. There was no other word for it from his office. Their rigid posture now spoke not of intimidation but of barely controlled panic. They had come expecting to frighten what they thought was prey, only to discover they had been prey themselves all along. As the door closed, Rebecca noted, the ambassador's final biochemical readings suggest he's going to recommend immediate cessation of all aggressive actions toward human interests. Good. Ken straightened his tie. Sometimes the most effective diplomatic tool is simply showing them what they're really dealing with. After all, humanity hadn't become the galaxy's great diplomats because they were weak. They had become diplomats because they were so very, very good at the alternative.